everybody. Welcome to Flip the Switch. I am your host, Marla Schultz. And boy, we have an amazing guest today, William Lee Martin, live from Dallas. He is a comic extraordinaire, screenwriter, philanthropist. We're going to tell everybody who you are and why the world needs to know you. How are you, Bill?
Was good. It's I'm actually in Fort Worth, just north of Fort Worth. As you know, and we're surviving the snow apocalypse of 2021 right now. So we have a once in about every 40 year storm coming through right now, and I just feel so blessed that I have lights and sound and heat, and which we're rolling through a lot of rolling blackouts in Texas right now. So I just feel real blessed. It's good to see you. Love the glasses.
Oh, thank you. They're my Mrs. Doubtfire glasses. First of all, I just want everybody to know where we met and how misleading first impressions are and can be. Do you remember?
It was a gentleman's club in Houston, Texas, and I was working, and Marla came in, and she's like, "Hey, you're a dancer. You ought to be a comedian with that body." And I was like, "Hey, Missy, less talky, more tippy." That's what I said. And no.
You were doing that. You were line dancing in Spanx.
I was worming. That's what I was doing. Yes. I was worming. I do that a lot with my cowboy hat. So no, it was a cruise ship, wasn't it?
It was a cruise ship. It was, I think, my second cruise, and we had the same agent. And I remember he told me that I would be working with a guy named Cowboy Bill because that's how you were known. And I was like, oh my God, I got to spend a week with a cowboy. I bet he does balloon animals and he's, just really tacky. And I was like, how am I going to survive this? And Roger said, no, Marla, he's a really cool guy. I was like, Cowboy Bill, cool guy. And then I texted you, and then you told me you were on, I don't know, deck 8. And I show up and I was just like, okay. You didn't look geeky and dorky. You were like this tall drink of water. And what was like the preconceived notion that you had of me?
Well, you were from New York, and he said she's already has the panic button completely pressed down, and she's in DEFCON 5. Can you help her? And I said, sure, I'll make sure I meet her on the tallest part of the ship, just in case she wants to jump. At least it'll be over like that. If I met you on deck 2, there's a chance that you could survive. Deck 8, no chance.
Exactly. No, but I also remember you thought I was going to be this really jappy chick that just wanted to go shopping all the time. And I thought this was another lesson, because when the student is ready to be taught, the teacher appears, and it's a real lesson in don't judge a book by its cover, because not only it was so great hanging out with you, you've been a really good friend. You've called me on my shite most recently. And, it's been a pleasure knowing you all these years, because you're a real inspiration, all kidding aside. And I think what you do and how you give back.
Well, even to get to that point, it's funny how we're always constantly trying to figure out who we are in the light of things, who people conceive us as, and how we see ourselves. And as comedians, how people perceive you and how you perceive yourself in the conflict of those two. A lot of times there's humor. And, for me, comedy didn't start till I was 30 years old. I wrote advertising out of college, and I hated every minute of it. I used to look out my floor window thinking, well, floors kill me or just break my leg. Right? And it'd never be a good break, even in my head. It's like high up on the leg, where you'd have to have a body cast and a catheter. I hate my job, and here's my poop. Right. And then one day, and I was miserable also at that point in my life. I'd gone through a divorce. I had written a book called Life Under the Neon Moon, Now That She's Gone and Took the Dog With Her, right? Which it was like a dating
title book. Too.
Yeah, a little long, you can't hashtag it. But it was It read like stand up, but it was basically a how they get back out there and be single and date again. And everybody kept telling me that it read like stand up, but lost my job in advertising. We got sold to another company, and it was my grandmother who said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Go home and look in the mirror and ask yourself, are you happy? You're almost
Wow.
30 years old, and I want to see you smile." And I
Oh,
like to say I did that, but I didn't. I went home and I stayed in the fetal position for 5.5 months. Would have been 6, but unemployment runs out in 5.5, right? And a true story, UPS driver comes next door, and I go next door to tell him I got fired. I'm supposed to be picking up a package for my neighbor, and I actually went over there just to throw the pity party, right? So I told this guy who I did not know, I'm fired, single dad, didn't know how I was going to make ends meet. And he looked at me like, good, that's one less box we'll bring out of here, dude. And completely dejected, I went home and I
wow.
turned off the phone. Yeah. So I went home and I turned off the phone and the television and all the distractions of life. And I got about 2 feet away from the mirror, and I asked myself, am I happy? And I knew the answer before I even asked, but I had a 4-hour conversation with what I believe was God that day. And I called my grandmother and I said, since I was 5 years old, all I've ever wanted to be is on stage and television, radio, and print. And she said, go for it. And I said, what if I lose the house? She said, buy you another one, boy. She said, I don't want you to be
Oh,
30 or 50 or 80 and go through the would have, could have, or should have. And this was from a woman that found out that she had a tumor on her lung about the size of my fist and, dying of lung cancer. And that's what I did. It was, I started out in stand up like everybody else does at an open mic, but in Arlington, Texas, and went with the mentality that I was not going to go look for another job. I was just going to go for it. And because the Vikings used to have that approach, they used to pull up to an island or a country, get everybody off the boat, set fire to the boat, and then you either conquered or you died, but you didn't retreat. And I kind of kept that mentality, and I went from open mic to headliner in 3 years, and now 25 years later, we've still been doing this thing.
Bill, you're one of the most amazing comedians I've had the pleasure of working with and watching, and your storytelling abilities are spectacular and on par with some of the greatest.
Well, thanks. It's I tell young comics all the time, quit trying to be funny and just report the news. For
Great advice.
yeah, most people don't realize that we're God's little punchlines. I tell people
I
the
say
example.
that.
I tell people all the time, if you don't believe me, I have 2 words for you: Yao Ming. Now, Yao Ming was a basketball player for the Houston Rockets, and he was almost 8 foot tall. Now, God made 6 billion Chinese people under 5 foot tall, and he makes one 8 foot. That's hilarious.
That is hilarious.
Who would have known God was a prop act?
That's funny. I used to always say I felt like I was God's court jester because it was my thinking, my stinking thinking that I played the victim. I had a tough upbringing with my dad. It was very difficult. And I love what you just said about your grandmother, how she just instilled so much faith and confidence in you. And were there any other members of your family that impacted you in such a profound way?
Well, yeah, I called my mother, and she passed away in 1998. So I called her up and I said, "Hey, Mom, I've decided I'm not going to go look for another job in advertising. I'm actually going to do stand-up comedy." She goes, "Really?" And she muffles the phone. And I can hear her tell my dad. She goes, "He wants to be a comedian. I don't think he's funny." And then got
Nice.
right back on the phone like she had never said it, and said, "Your dad said to go for it." And she became a big fan of it. She really did. But she passed away just 2.5 years into my comedy career, which was pretty tough.
I'm sorry.
Marla, my mom and dad moved away when I was 15 years old. So I finished my junior and senior year on my own.
Oh, wow.
As a matter of fact, yeah. So my dad had a series of these 3 heart attacks between my 15th and 16th birthday, and they moved to East Texas. And They moved to a place where I was going to go to a little bitty school to finish out the last 2 years. And I was active in a big school, and drums was all my life then, and drum corps. And I was going to go to a band that had less people in the whole band than we had in our drum line,
Oh, wow.
And so my dad and I didn't get along at all. And my dad was like, you can either stay here and you can keep your mouth shut, or you can move back and you can go move with your brother, who was 7 years older than I was, and I'm 16, so he's 23.
Wow.
And don't call me for any money. Or, after he walked out, I reached underneath the bed. Remember, like yesterday, I had an old blue suitcase, and I filled that blue suitcase, and I was gone. I was gone.
Wow.
So no, I just because they give you a little boost, at those two spots, it's not always as rosy as it seems. I think most of us, I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day about this idea of trying to have everybody be inclusive these days in 2021. Everything's inclusive. And what so many people don't realize is that there are stories of non-inclusiveness in everybody's life. We just don't ever focus on them. We don't think, there's a white guy, right? Sounds like he had it pretty good with his mom and dad. Well, I get a scholarship in music and academics, and my dad and I go have a conversation. And instead of that great moment where they put their arm around you and go, like in the movies, like always in the movies, they put their arm around and go, "You're gonna do more than I've ever done, son." I got the lecture on how folks like us don't go to college, and that he could get me a job working in a factory. And what 18-year-old in 1984 is making $14 an hour, right? So I turned down both the scholarships at first, and then I take this factory job where I'm taking off 3 bolts, changing out the socket, and doing 2 more bolts on these old alternator parts and shoving it down the line. Wow. And I got in trouble the first day because I was going too fast. The old guys that work there, the union guys, they're like, "Hey, kid, that crap's going to be here tomorrow. Won't you relax? Won't you go use the bathroom for a while?" Right? And I made it through the 60 days. I made it to the union, and it was like out of a movie. I'm watching, a TV. Back then, the TVs had, they were 900 pounds. But it's bolted up in the air. I'm in the break room. I'm eating my brown paper bag sandwich, and I'm looking around the room, and I'm 18 years old, and I thought, this is what my life is going to be 45 years from now if I don't leave right now. And I took off, and the old man didn't talk to me for 4 months because I walked away from the union job.
Wow.
So, there has to be that internal thing always.
Sure.
With you,
But when did you,
point,
I was going to say, when did you know, do you remember the moment where you were like, I want to be a comedian?
Yeah, it was when I saw, and people don't like this name, but it still is the impact for me. But I saw Bill Cosby and himself, the stand-up himself, 1984 or 1985. He's in the brown suit, and pound per pound, that's still the best stand-up comedy special I've ever seen. And it impacted me so much. And then I was a big Tim Allen fan, but I also like guys like Robert Klein, a lot of the headier guys. And then suddenly, it kind of planted the seed. But I really, when I was 5 years old, I either wanted to sing or write movies. That's all I wanted to do. And stand-up comedy didn't come to me till later on in life. I wasn't a class clown. I wasn't funny. I wasn't popular.
Because I've always wanted to be a comic. I just had a real awareness. And I also was, I learned at a very early age that comedy would connect me. and it made me precocious. And I would go visit my friend. I lived on a cul-de-sac, and I would go visit my friends' parents and, you know, hustle like going swimming in their pool because we didn't have a pool. And I learned how to just really survive by my comic chops. And I loved how it also connected me with so many people, because as a funny kid, I got invited to things. I talked, you know, in junior high, the tough girls, I made them laugh. They didn't want to kick my ass. So I always felt that stand-up was a great way to survive. Did you feel that way about your sense of humor?
Only at home, only at home. I was the youngest of four, and my dad was a truck driver. My mom hurt her back when I was probably, I don't know, 10 years old. So my brother and I had to, raise ourselves together, for a lot of it. It was a different kind of upbringing, but humor, I could make him laugh, and that was my big go-to. And my close friends. But no, when you're a guy in Texas, if you're going to try to make the bullies laugh, you're still going to get your ass whooped. So,
well, my dad and we had like this kind of relationship, but he was funny and he had an encyclopedic memory for jokes. And in fact, 6 months before he died, he did an hour of stand-up, and he hadn't been on a stage. I mean, he could just recall jokes from the greats like Buddy Hackett and just Dean Martin, Jack Benny, just all of the greats. And I said, Dad, you got to do an hour. Don't you want to rehearse? And he's like, nope. And he went up, he did an hour, and we got it on tape. But I would connect with him. And if there was ever like a tough situation, if I made him laugh, I could see like the rage just switch, and then he would start laughing. And that's what I attribute like my sense of humor as, I guess, one of my, like a superpower. I look at it as a real gift. Do you feel that way?
It's funny that you say superpower, because I just watched a documentary on the Disney Plus called Under the Mask, and it's all about the alter egos of the Marvel comic heroes.
Yeah.
And sometimes as comedians, I could relate to the entire documentary because it talks about the alter ego. For me, there are absolutely two different personalities. It's the guy that you see at lunch, that when we go and have these long talks and everything else, and then that persona that I can bring on stage, which is a reflection of who I am. But once I have on I got on the mask and everything else, and the lights are up, it's a different deal. And I think for me it became a coping, but for me it's always been about the writing, whether it's been writing songs, writing scripts, writing comedy, writing advertising. It's just really words. It's just trying to words together, and then the techniques of it. We talk about it all the time, technique of comedy. For me, I always write the joke a lot of times backwards, so I know where the punchline's going.
Right.
Now, how many words do I not have to use to get there? So a dichotomy of words, an economy of words.
Yeah.
If I can get there quicker, then the laugh is there. But for me, comedy has always been about survival more than anything.
How so?
It gave me purpose. It really did. I had, even now, through the year of COVID, I started doing this 4 p.m. daily talk, and we had about 40,000 followers at the time. And right now, it's about 400,000 more people are following, in the 10 months. So we went 40,000 to 500,000. And really it's that I'm still using the same principle of it coping. It's me talking. It's me feeling like I have purpose to do this at 4 o'clock. And I tell people all the time, and I know it sounds like a cliche, but I get more out of those talks than I think they ever know that I would possibly get out of it. And all we've done is just try to be positive, I don't talk about numbers. I don't talk about, anything like mask or what to do and who said what, and this side has this and this side has that. Those are no thing that I can control. None of those things I can control. The one thing I can control is smiling, laughing. Even if you fake laugh, your body still doesn't know that it's a fake, and it produces the endorphin, exactly what you need. So as I tell all of America, always, fake it as much as you can.
I look at my mom is battling pancreatic cancer, and she's lived with it for, stage 3.5 years. And everybody that meets her says, oh my God, she's so amazing. And not that she was in my father's shadow, but she's really like come into her own, and she is so funny and she is so positive. And it's a real gift to watch her deal with a life-threatening disease and to step into her comedic powers. She made a joke. She was in the chemo room, and when she has to get up and use the restroom, she has to drag her pole. And she walked up to the nurses and she goes, hey, guess what? This is my pole, and I'm a pole dancer. And everybody was like, who is this lady? But it's almost like she's sprinkling her magic dust. And for me, when I get up, and if I can turn a painful situation and fun and make it funny, and if somebody in the audience comes up and says, thank you for making me feel like I'm not alone, because I started talking about depression and anxiety, and it's so gratifying to hear it from somebody else, but also for myself, because the name of the show, Flipping the Switch, is I feel that comedy, and when you laugh at something, it kind of diffuses the power and the pain. And if you can do it for yourself and then do it for others, I just think, we're just sprinkling our magic dust onto everybody, because everybody needs to laugh. And it's so important, especially nowadays, to be positive and to find the humor in things, because just like you said, the endorphins, boom, it will change, it will turn a frown upside down, is what my mother used to say.
Yeah, but there's also the element of just, I don't want to sound like I'm out curing diseases. Let's face it, I like being the center of attention. I dig that part of it.
Me too.
There's those things that yeah. So, it's not like I'm out to try to save the world. But, there's things that have happened in my life over the last 5 years that have changed my philosophy of life. And one of the biggest things is that once I realized that life wasn't happening to me, that it wasn't personal, that I didn't have a black cloud over my head, that my past upbringing had nothing to do with my future if I didn't take it with me, that suddenly I realized when it wasn't personal, that life wasn't happening to me. It was simply happening. It was just happening. It's just happening now. There's nothing that's going on in life. Even this frozen tundra that we're living in Texas, there's nothing that's stopping the world from happening. If you don't believe me, look at the forecast. Next Wednesday, it's going to be 72 degrees here.
Wow.
Okay. 72 degrees. So you have to gain a philosophy eventually that you are just going to go through your life. And you have that choice. You have the choice to smile on your face and not carrying that stuff with you. Or you have, I know people that are the victim mentality. I know the people that are the anger at the whole world mentality. I know the people that have been hurt and they're like, I'm never going to let anybody hurt me again. When you realize that it's not personal, you don't have a cloud over your head, that you're just going through life. It takes a lot of pressure off of all the other things.
Yeah, but how did you come upon that philosophy and then adopt it?
It's been a process. First of all, so many things that happened in my life, I truly felt that I made the mistakes myself. And some of it has to do with understanding it from comedy. One of the greatest lessons I've ever learned is not to give the audience credit and not to give them blame. There's
Yes.
usually not 235 people go to a comedy club and want to go stare at somebody. Most of them are there with the anticipation to have fun, right?
Yeah.
But you see comics walk off and they go, "Oh, that crowd sucked."
Right.
But then when you go and you reflect on yourself and you go sit down somewhere alone, you're like, man, I know when I did that is when I turned them off on that. For me, one of the biggest pet peeves I ever have is somebody putting their feet on a stage. I cannot stand it. For some
Oh.
reason, and for years, I wouldn't even wait to, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Cowboy Bill. And I get up and the first words out of my mouth was, get your feet off the stage and da 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 da. And then the whole audience is like, whoa, that person's still with us. We don't even know who you are, even if they came to see me, because there's that mentality of it all. And you
Right.
realize at some point that you're the reason that it turned. So if you control your emotions, and don't do that at the beginning, bring them into who you are, then you realize these are the mistakes that I'm making. So at some point, I was realizing I was making a lot of mistakes by being insecure, by being overly aggressive, by being overly cocky, and not giving the thanks for somebody other than myself for creating myself. Right. So once I began to give those things, it really started changing around everything that I was doing mentally and physically and creatively. And it really did change.
No, it's really important though to be able to learn from the mistakes and not keep doing it over and over and over again. I know, like for me, my stand up was, going back to what you said earlier, was an extension and it was a protection, and it made me, I got to a place, like the healthier I got, the less authentic I felt by being like this tough New Yorker, dropping the F-bomb, and it stopped working, and it stopped working with the audience because they could sense that I wasn't really being authentic. But then when you finally peel away the layers, and then you get to who you are and you really present your authentic self and your authentic point of view, that's when I felt things were changing, and it made me be a better comic. And I was also grateful. Instead of like when we first met, I was a neurotic mess, and I got on stage going, oh my God, they're going to hate me. And to have to work so hard to overcome this like crazy notion in your head, that took a lot of work. And I just, I probably had no business being on a cruise ship because I was just so like overcome with emotion and anxiety. But it's a good thing to finally just get to a place where you can be yourself, and you can share your unique point of view, and share your gifts, because that's when it's really rewarding. And that's when I felt like things changed for me.
Well, I've been striving for that myself. And people always ask, why Cowboy Bill, now William Lee Martin, right? And a lot of people don't realize that my grandfather's name was William Lee. My name is William Lee. He didn't want me to be called Little Bill, so he said, call him Cowboy Bill as a nickname. And I was actually named after an old wrestler back in the 60s called Cowboy Bill Watts. And then he died when I was like 6, so nobody called me Bill or Billy. Nobody certainly called me Cowboy Bill. And then I, when I went to do this comedy thing, I was supposed to do a call in, and for a radio station, I created this call in right before I ever got stand up based on the book. So I set it up with this radio guy, and I was patterning it after Larry the Cable Guy, who was doing the same kind of call ins. And I was calling to do a Wednesday night ladies night at a dance club in Arlington, Texas, called Cowboys. And the guy started out the segment, and he goes, we've got Cowboy Bill at Cowboys in Arlington. And that's where I picked it up again. It just felt like it was the right thing. And then I realized after a while that real cowboys that work real horses and cows and everything else, like my dad and those kind of guys, they're not going to come see a guy named Cowboy Bill. They're just not. They're like, I'm a real cowboy. I don't call myself cowboy.
Right.
And then black folks and brown folks don't come and see Cowboy Bill because the name cowboy turns them off. And then it always, like this right here, came with an explanation as well. So I was working the cruise ships and I did my CMT special. I got that in 2015. My wife and I produced it ourselves. We got it on television. Everybody said we couldn't. We did. I mean, it was like the Little Rascals. We're going to do a show and build the set. And, we did all of that.
Happy birthday, Mr. Hood. Happy birthday to ya.
Exactly. So we get the special and then, it comes out, Cowboy Bill Martin. And the first 5 years of my career, I worked clean and then I got dirty for 15 years. And, just chasing that, whatever that was. And then the special comes out and I even made the proclamation. I'm not going to change anything about it. I'm going to do the show I'm going to do.
Right.
And then after I did it and they had to beep it, I wasn't proud of it.
Right.
I just wouldn't. It got 1.7 million people to watch it, and I wasn't proud of it. I couldn't show my kids. I couldn't show my grandkids. I wasn't proud to show it. If people were at the house, I couldn't just pop it on because it seemed awkward. In a club, it seems like it's so natural.
Yeah.
Because people are drinking and you're having fun. But just to have, for me, but I still wasn't going to change it. I still was too scared, because it's working everywhere I was going. So it's hard to give up, when you're making money and everything else. And then one day, Marla, I'm out mowing the grass and I began to pray about it. I'm like, God, why can't I grab the brass ring? You let Rodney Carrington grab the brass ring. You let Ron White grab the brass ring. So obviously there's not a morality clause in this thing. Right. So you're not exactly holding them up to a standard because they're cussing like crazy and everything else. And they're flying around in G7s. Where's my G7? Pretty arrogant. And just like you and I are talking, the voice in my head said, listen, I put you on a cruise ship for 7 years and you can do anything with your life. And the only thing you were willing to do was change your name. And you want me to work the miracle. You're waiting on me. I'm waiting on you.
Wow.
And I made wholesale changes to the act right then. I mean, that day. And so I went from, I'd already changed the name, but then I changed the act and I dropped all the F-bombs and I got more creative with the writing. I still want to do adult shows, it's kind of like a Jim Gaffigan, but with a cowboy hat. So they're for grown-ups. I don't want, I'm not really interested in entertaining 10-year-olds, in the room. But I wanted to write a show that I could show my grown kids, that I could show my neighbors in my living room, that I no longer had to explain myself for it. And then I realized, Marla, like 2 years after I did it, and then I got 2 specials on Amazon and everything else, that the brass ring I was searching for was the wrong ring anyway.
Right.
The brass ring that I was truly searching for is to know who I was on and off stage. And that took me 22 years of stand-up comedy to figure out who I am on and off stage.
Well, it's like you become integrated after a while. Like I would hide behind my persona because it was like I had a hard time really connecting, but I could connect to the audiences. But God forbid you're vulnerable in an interpersonal setting. That's, that was always challenging. But to become integrated, to become whole, I think is a gift of stand-up because, the average person might not get the opportunity to really get to know both sides of yourself. And, also you said something about just God. There's a saying, God, man plans, God laughs. And I think it's, it's really important to get centered and believe in something bigger than yourself and be able to hear the direction and then follow through if that is what you want to do to achieve a goal.
Well, for me, it's opened up, if you would have put COVID on my life 5 years ago, I'm not sure how I would have taken it, honestly. But now, now that I have this philosophy of life is what it is, and we'll just continue on, and also what exactly is in store for me. So with the whole COVID thing, man, I started, I started really wanted to songwrite. So I've been, I'd written some songs on my own and with the other guys for a couple of years or so. And then through the COVID thing, I've done songwriting things with guys that are from Nashville and Texas and that kind of stuff, and done these songwritings up here in the loft, and to a point to where we sent off a couple of them, and I got a publishing deal in Nashville a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, congratulations!
And then
was it the song you sent me?
Which one did I send? The because I've written a bunch now. At the end of the day.
No, it wasn't at the end of the day.
It's just me.
Just me and you. And it was all about love. Yeah. And I was like, my God, what can this guy not do?
Well, it's it was one of those days. It was a Sunday, and about a month ago, and it was the first time that it snowed here in 2 years or so. But I got up Sunday and I was watching Meet the Depressed.
Oh, right? That's funny.
So Meet the Press. Yeah, thanks. So I was just
really, really funny.
Thanks. I was watching both sides blame each other for all the problems. Nobody giving a solution. Giving a solution, but everybody blaming each other. It's an hour of this side did this and this side did that, and nobody saying, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we fix it this way? I just said this on this whole grid thing here in Texas. Because I had somebody get on my little page and say, I hope the Democrats are happy about the Green Deal or whatever. And I said, do you really think that this happened from January 20th? Right. I said, especially here in Texas. I said, drive around. First of all, in 1988, when the last time we had weather like this, we had 16.5 million people in this state. We now have 30 million people in this state. Wow. And I'm not real great with math. That sounds like 2 times the amount. Yeah. Right? So you have twice the amount of demand. I said, drive around any neighborhood that just pops up. And here they just pop up. These suburbs pop up everywhere now, right? Because we're building so many houses here. And yet they don't change any of the roads. I go, and then you get in that neighborhood and you're like, did nobody see this coming? Did nobody go, maybe we ought to go more than 2 lanes? I said, those are the same people that said the same thing about the grid. Right. Never looked at the grid, never said, hey, maybe 30 million people aren't going to be able to make it on the same grid that we have 16 million people on if something ever happens. But the American taxpayer doesn't want to pay for something that happens every 40 years.
But it makes no sense. It's all about the infrastructure. And I think it's a great metaphor for people, for life. I mean, you have to work on the inside in order to flourish on the outside. And I just thought of that. I think that's pretty brilliant. But infrastructure is always overlooked. I'm in North Carolina. It's crazy.
It's not sexy. It's not sexy. Let's be honest. It's not sexy. Infrastructure is not sexy. There's no sound bites about power grids, there's no sound bites.
Just that it's gone out. That's a big sound bite.
Now it's great sound bite. 3 weeks ago, when this hadn't happened for 40 years, you can't sell America on things that might happen. That's never been sold. And that's the biggest problem, is that most people don't like to see what might happen, and now that it has happened, you probably will see some updates. But the government has always been, and I don't want to get on this rant, but has always been reactive and not proactive. But and the moment people realize that they're not going to be proactive ever, it's easier to blame each other and stay in office than it is to fix something and think you're going to be a hero 10 years down the road.
Yeah, but that's our insurance companies are modeled under that philosophy too. Like, never preventative. Well, we can give you an injection and trying to figure out, like, where is it coming from? Maybe it's not the original source. And that's just, it's unfortunate, but that just seems like it's the American way of life. I love how you say apolitical. And I really appreciated you calling me up because I wrote something and the minute I posted it, I knew I shouldn't have done it. And despite getting lots of positives and lots of likes, and then, somebody from the other side calling me a communist and a commie bastard, which I'm not. And we got on the phone, and before you said it, I knew what you were going to say, and I really appreciated it. But in the course of that conversation, you said some really great advice.
Yeah.
What's your role?
The less fingers I use in an email, the less likely I need to press send.
Oh,
if
that's
I've got
funny.
all 10, okay. But if I'm down to these 2, then do not press send.
Oh, that's funny. Bill, I got to tell you, you have some great Billisms. You have some really awesome pearls of wisdom. I think the next thing you do, you should just put them all in and, like The World According to Bill or the Tao of Bill.
So I just hired a new agent, and she's, you would love her. She's from New York originally, moved out to LA to work with the ICM, the comedy division. And then she got with the guy that she was working with the guy that started Live Nation, and now she's in Boston.
Nice.
And but she wanted the layout of my business of what I've done, with songwriting, all those things. And so today I just wrote a deal called the Willy Bible, and
nice.
So I gave her so I gave her 6 pages of all the things that I've done in the 25 years in this silly business.
Somebody once asked me this question, and they said, "What advice would you give your younger self?"
One, it's going to take longer than you've ever imagined. Okay, because especially when you go from open mic to headliner in 3 years, I truly thought that the golden gates of fame and fortune were going to open up pretty quick for me. And let's face it, 5 years into my career, I'm out touring with George Jones and doing shows with George Strait, and I was the 5th guy signed with the Blue Collar Tour. But there was also a lot of other things that can come into play on those things, personal life, and your own ego, and your own heart aches, and your own fragile self that you never get past. I was so picked on in school because I was buck-toothed, skinny, that I had a profound fear of speaking in public. I used to throw up before speech classes in both high school and in college. And I
would throw up and cut. I would throw up and cut the class. Okay. That was my thing. But anyway.
But so to do it for a living, and there was just to even find it, for me, I just feel so fortunate that I was able to find. There's so many people that never find that thing that they're really good at, or that thing that they really enjoy, or the thing that if they take it away from you, it crushes your soul. That's been the hardest thing with COVID, is not only did it change a lot of what's going on, but they took away my dream. And then when people just dismissed it and say, go find something else, it's like, listen, brother, I didn't have a job. I had a life and a lifestyle, and I had put all effort into it. I've taken all the chips and put them in the center of the table and said, I'm all in. So to tell me now to get up and go, work at Home Depot, I was like, forget you, man. This is my dream, and let's go find something because this too will pass. This will pass. And I just feel blessed that I found other stuff to do.
You lose your passion, and you lose your focus, and you lose your drive. That to me was more terrifying than getting COVID, which I did, and thankfully I survived. But to then come back to what it is, the joie, the joy, and booked an amazing year. I had all these theater shows. I actually was going to do one more cruise and festivals. I had all this stuff, and then COVID hit. And I really give you a lot of credit that you've been able to use this time to write incredible songs, and I'm sure spectacular stand-up.
Well, thanks. You know, some of it has to do with the fact that my rededication to a higher being. You know, there are people that don't believe in a higher being, and that's great. If that works for you, then that's great. For me, it's also, it makes me smaller in the conversation.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
How because it takes the onus. It takes the onus. It's like you're giving it over. It takes the onus off of you. Is my interpretation, and it's like almost sharing the journey and receiving guidance as opposed to you making all the decisions. Is that correct?
And also realizing that when things don't go as planned, that's also the blessing.
Yes.
There's something to be said about disappointment. I understand disappointment. We're all disappointed. But there's also something to being said about, when you pray and you ask for something and the answer comes back no, take the answer.
Right.
How many people get into a relationship and they're like, God, if you will just give me a sign that this person is not supposed to be with me. And then God goes, here's the big old sign.
Right.
There it is. And you go, not that one. I want a different sign now. I wanted the one that was blue. And
right.
Instead of saying, I asked for it, you gave me, because the universe, whether or not you believe in a higher being like I do, but the universe will direct you through energy. I truly believe that. That's where it's more metaphysical and that kind of thing. But just like this on this COVID thing. So the COVID thing hit and we had theaters. I was leaving the ships, for a big part of it. We had 9 theaters booked in March, April, May. I mean, good theaters and selling tickets, and then this hit and everything kind of unraveled. But I didn't get upset and I didn't get mad because, again, it's not happening to me personally. It's just happening. And then my marketing team was like, well, you need to do a virtual show. And I said, well, listen, if you can show me how to do stand-up without an audience, then I'll do it. Until then, no thanks. And they said, well, you at least need to flip on the camera and talk into the camera because you're getting a lot of views right now with your specialist coming out. And I was like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard of. And then one day I was outside. I remember like this, right outside by the pool. And I flipped on my camera phone and I just talked in the camera like I was talking to a friend about being positive, putting a smile on your face and feeling the blessing of the day. And then suddenly it was at 4:00. It just happened to be at 4:00. And then I did it the next day. And then the next day and the next day and the next day. And then suddenly we had a thing going. Right. And then people were watching. And I mean, it was lots of people at
they're great. They're great.
And then I started doing like a Saturday night movie night with my audience. So I would have the movie over my shoulder and I would comment on some of the most ridiculous popular movies ever, like Independence Day, which was easy for me to make fun of with Will Smith, made $1 billion. So what does it care that I pick on it? But little things in the movie just drove me crazy. Like, the aliens finally come, right? Remember they came and it's a huge alien spaceship and they're there and Will Smith is there with his girlfriend. And we've waited as human beings for other forms of life to finally show up, and they have, and his girlfriend's got to go work at the strip club.
I forgot that.
Who wrote that part? Because maybe they might have been
some guy who's into porn. That's who wrote it.
Yeah. So I did that, and then one day, you remember we did 24 hours here.
Yes.
In here. So we did from 12 noon to 12 noon the next day, and out of that was born this saying right here that so many of my fans hear me say all the time. It says you got to take it 1 minute, to get through 1 hour, to get through one day. You know, one of my favorite sayings ever is, how do you eat an elephant?
I don't know. How do you eat an elephant? You don't.
One bite at a time. No, one bite at a time.
Okay.
Can't swallow the whole damn thing.
Tell everybody about Cowboy Who Cares. Where did it come from and how's it going?
Sure. So, some of my philosophy really started when I started working with kids with cancer. And my wife and I formed a charity called Cowboys Who Care Foundation. And how we started was with one child, and her name was Ashley Miller. Her mom and dad asked me to put my name on a golf tournament to raise some money for her. She had a rare form of cancer. So we did, and got to know her and her mom and dad. And then cancer goes into remission. Then it came back with a vengeance, and she lost her battle with cancer in June 2011. So we were asked to come over to the prayer vigil, and when they were going to take her off of life support, and it truly affected my very core, so I get on the ship a couple of weeks later, and they give me a room with a bunk bed. I'm pretty ticked off about it. I'm 6'3". I'm in a bunk bed. What am I doing with my life? Me.
Yeah.
And then the next day, after calm down, I just Googled kids with cancer images, kind of opened it up to the universe, try to find an answer. And I had all these big, bright, beautiful faces, beautiful smiles, and bald heads. And in the mirror, because of where I was sitting and where the bunk bed was, in the mirror, my hat setting on top, I could see it.
Wow.
And that was the aha moment. I was like, well, these kids need cowboy hats. What 7-year-old wants to wear a wig, but what 7-year-old wouldn't want to wear a cowboy hat? So we formed Cowboys Who Care Foundation, a nonprofit organization, started delivering cowboy hats, to kids with cancer and other life-threatening illnesses. And, one of the greatest places that we ever went was in the Bronx to a Orthodox Jewish hospital, and me and 3 other cowboys in New York. They've got the hair and we've got the cowboy hats, and we first walked in, and you could truly tell that people were like, why are you here?
Right.
Are you here to make fun of us? Are you here to ridicule us? Or
Right.
What are you exactly here for? And then when they realized that, so many of those kids had never even seen a horse or a cow, except maybe in the Bronx Zoo or something, So to have cowboys walk through there, and by the time we were finished, this beautiful thing came together. People who just knew that we were just there to put a smile on a kid's face. And I don't care whose kid it is. And so that's how Cowboys Who Care came about. But I watched these kids act completely different, all the kids, than I do watch grown-ups with cancer. I love the fact that you said about your mom with her having her sense of humor. These kids grab that pole and sling it around and everything else. And then I go see somebody, a grown-up, with it, and they'll just walk so gingerly with everything, like everything, and these kids teach me that you have to appreciate just to get through the minute, to get through the hour, to get through the day. Sometimes just to do the treatment is just to get through that small section.
Sure. And also I notice when I am being silly and my husband and we make each other laugh. I'm just so grateful for a sense of humor. I really, I thank the universe. Thank you so much for making me who I am today. And it took me a long time to get there, to be able to appreciate, who I am and what I contribute, and, what, and the people that I've been fortunate enough to call friends, like you. You're just such a gift. You're such a gift to your friends and your family and truly humanity. And I hope you know that.
It's powerful. I appreciate you saying it. I'm just trying to do my little part, and when I did start flipping on the camera, I also get a lot out of it. When I take a cowboy hat to a kid, I get a lot out of it. It erases a lot of pain on my own part, and every human being, you don't ever get through any of this unscathed,
No.
And we certainly don't get through it as easy as everybody seems to think that the other person has it, and
Right.
And the one thing I wish people would just be is just a little nicer to each other.
Agreed.
Just a little nice. Just start out with that. If we added 10% of kindness to every day, I've started a new philosophy. I mean, it literally just started. It's called 2.5 hours a day. So forever I've wanted to change my body, and I want to keep writing as much as possible. So, and I only started this 2 days. So maybe 3 days from now, I don't know if I can do it. But I decided 2.5 hours. If I did a half an hour of workout and 2 hours of writing dedicated in the morning. So if I got up at 7, ate my breakfast, worked out from 7:30 to 8 because I have a gym in my house, believe it or not.
I'm jealous.
And then if I wrote from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock, then no matter what I did for the rest of the day, I at least accomplished those things. And I'm gonna start doing that. And because as I tell, you asked me what I tell my kids, one thing I tell them always is that a dream without works is merely a wish.
Yeah.
If you don't do all the planning, that's great too, but you got to do the work.
My job is just to make people laugh. And if I can take a situation and flip it and then make somebody laugh about it, that's what I'm here to do. That's what life is all about. We're all given a story, and it's up to us to either, swim upstream and, go on the hero's journey. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I just found out yesterday I'm on ancestry.com, right? And I'm really deep into it. And I found out that I had a great uncle who died in 1938 in the insane asylum in Texas. I got to see his certificate of death. So it had it in there that what he died from, but it didn't seem like it made sense to me. But no autopsy, but they said that he had something with his heart, some sort of bacterial thing with his heart, which was weird. But yeah, he died in the insane asylum, which is kind of weird, at the age of 37.
Oh, that's too bad. That's too bad.
Found out that my great grandfather was in the Civil War on the north side.
That's why I like you. You had that Yankee sensibility. We Jews call it sechel, which is Yiddish for like soul, street smarts. Sechel. Could you imagine? It's try and say it. Sechel.
Sechel.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So funny.
All right, darling.
So
Are you doing with me?
Yes, I am.